been about 8 or 9 months since I first started up my 347 stroker and put it through a break-in cycle. When I drained the oil, obviously I did like most people do, and I checked for metal particles, and I didn't see anything concerning in the oil. But I kept the oil filter, and I kept the oil filter because I'm an aircraft mechanic, and one of the most common jobs that's done in aviation maintenance on reciprocating piston engines, aviation reciprocating piston engines, is to inspect the oil filter for contaminants. Aviation engines live a short but spectacular life. They're good for 2,000 hours or so between overhauls, which compared to an automotive engine really isn't a whole lot. It's plenty of flying, but comparing that to mileage on an automobile engine, it's really not in the same category. Aviation engines are designed a lot differently. They have greater tolerances, and they really aren't built to the same tolerances as automotive engines, and they wear a lot. And so when you do the annual inspection on them, part of that inspection and part of any oil change, and oil changes happen about every 25 hours, is part of that is to cut open the oil filter and inspect the filter element for particles, metal particles, to see what you can see. And you can tell a lot by those metal particles, depending on the color. They could be, if it's shiny chrome or something like that, it could be from a bearing race if you have ball bearings like some aviation engines do for certain components inside. But with an automotive engine, we're dealing mostly with what are called plain bearings. These are the type of bearings that you see on the mains and on the cams. And plain bearings put off a type of sort of a metallic powder, if you will, very fine metallic particles that come off. When you break in the engine, of course, you're going to see, you should see a fair amount, especially in the very first break-in cycle. The rings and they scrape up and down on the cylinder walls. They have to wear in. They have to they have to conform to the shape. The cam surfaces have to wear in. The main and camshaft bearings have to wear. And all of that's going to put a little bit of metal into the oil. This is normal, and you should see that. And to help that happen properly, you should be using a break-in engine oil. I'm not going to harp on that subject. People seem to be really passionate about it. But one thing that an engine needs on break-in that you won't find in conventional oils is a high amount of zinc. So if you don't want to pay for break-in oil, then buy some zinc additive at least and put that in it, because the engine really needs a high zinc content in the oil for the break-in. But however you do it, whatever you use for oil, you shouldn't leave it in there for very long. You should do your break-in and maybe a couple tuning cycles after that, and then change the oil. And then with fresh oil in it, you can go in and, once you get the thing on the street, driving it is when you really break the rings in. And the old story you used to hear about, you can't get on it or you can't push the engine until it's broken in is really kind of misguided. The best way to let the rings seat or help the rings seat is to go mid to 3/4 throttle at least, and let it accelerate hard, and then back off of the throttle and let it decelerate hard. Those pressure cycles, when you accelerate hard, it builds up pressure in the cylinders, higher pressure. That forces the rings down on the bottom of the ring lands. When you let off of the gas and the engine winds down hard, that vacuum draws the rings up to the top of the ring lands, and it helps them to move back and forth. And that back and forth movement is what helps the rings to seat and to wear. And so driving it around, idling it, and babying it at 30 miles an hour for 500 miles is not how you break in an engine. That's the opposite of how you break in an engine. I'm not saying go do burnouts and go racing with it, but definitely work the engine hard and make sure you change the oil at least a few times when you're going through that cycle. I usually do it immediately after the break-in. Then I'll put maybe 50 to 100 miles or so on the engine, and I'll change it, and then I'll go 500 miles, and then I'll go 2,000 miles, and then I'll go into a regular oil change cycle. So I've been inspecting oil filters for a long time for metal particulates, and I'm really good at spotting what to look for inside the filter element. But I recognize that a lot of people outside of aviation haven't done that before. Even within aviation, if you've focused mostly on turbine engines and large aircraft, then you wouldn't have seen that. And so I'm going to show you what that looks like, how to use a filter cutter, what the tool looks like, how to open up the filter element, how to spread it out, what to look for. And I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail, but I'll walk you through the steps and show you how I go about it. So I'm going to start by showing you that aviation tool, the filter cutter. And these are readily available. They're inexpensive. You can get them off Amazon, $20 on up. Real easy to use. So here's what it looks like. This is the tool that I use to cut open oil filters and inspect the element inside. It's really easy to use. If you've ever used a plumbing pipe cutter, then you already know how to use this tool. So it's got a threaded portion here, and it's got two different thread sizes on it. This is, again, an aviation tool, and most aviation oil filters use standard automotive thread sizing. These are standard thread pitch. And so it's got a larger one on this side and a smaller one on this side, and I've already set it up to properly spin on my Ford oil filter here. So I'll mount this in the vise, and it's got a cutter wheel here and a threaded knob here. So the oil filter threads on to this post here, and this post can rotate once the filter's on. And so all you have to do is rotate this knob here to move the cutter in towards the filter. And once it comes in contact, rotate the filter, tighten it a little more, rotate the filter, tighten it a little more, and you do that until the filter element is, or till the case of the filter has been cut through, and you can remove it to expose the element. So let me get it set up in the vise here, and I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, so now the filter is threaded onto the tool, and you can see once it's threaded on, it can still rotate. And the cutter wheel itself is maybe a 1/4 inch or so off of the rolled seam here. And as I roll the cutter in and rotate the oil filter, it's just going to cut it through right there, and I'll be able to pull the outer case off, exposing the filter element. Sometimes, even though you let the filter drain into an oil pan, there's still a little bit of oil left on the inside, and so there may be a little spillage here. Hopefully it won't be too bad and make a mess out of my workbench here, but you just keep rotating it and giving it a little turn on the cutter, and you can see it's already cutting through. And as I mentioned, it's going to spill a little bit of oil that's normal. And it's still hung somewhere right there, and then it's got to be hung over here. And so now we've got it removed, and we can pull the actual filter element out. And so now I'm going to take this filter element, I'm going to pull the end caps off, and I'm going to spread this element out, and we can look and see what sort of metal particles were captured within the filter. And I'm really interested in the size. I want to know if there's any big pieces in here. I know there's going to be metal in it. That's normal for an engine break-in. But the oil itself doesn't look like a pearlescent paint job, which is good. When I drained the oil, I did see a little bit of metal in it, which is absolutely normal. I would be concerned if I did a break-in run and did not see any oil or any metal particles, because that would mean that the metal parts aren't abrading and wearing themselves in as they should. But you don't want to see a high amount of metal, and you don't want to see big pieces. This is just more to satisfy my own curiosity and peace of mind to see what exactly was captured by this filter element. So I'm going to let this drain a little bit and clean everything up, and then I'll take the end caps off and roll it out and see what's inside. So I started pulling the top off of the filter here, and I figured I'd stop and turn the camera on for you. I just wanted to demonstrate that there's no special process to this. The metal caps on both ends of the filter are glued on when they manufacture these things. They lay out the paper element, and then they just glue on the end caps. They install the center core and the paper element around it, and then just glue these on. So they're really easy to pull off. There you go. And so once they're off, you can usually find where the end is, but it really doesn't matter. You could tear it anywhere you want to. I'm just going to tear it right there, and from here you can just sort of break the ends, the glue that's on the ends, to get the paper element to spread out. And that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to spread it out so you can look down in the folds of the filter. There's no special process to this, other than you got to be willing to get your hands oily. Some of the filters come apart easier than others. This particular one, the adhesive on the ends is really stuck together. And so I'm just breaking it. And what that allows me to do is to then fan out the filter and look at it flat and look between the folds. And what I'm going to look for here, and I'll do this off camera, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a 10 power magnifying glass, and I'm just going to take a detailed look down in all those folds, and I'm going to see what there is to see. I do expect to find metal in there. As I said, that's what you want. That's what a break-in run is for. You know, you set all the gaps and tolerances on the rings and bearings and piston rings and all that sort of stuff. But when you put it together, even on a perfectly machined engine, the engine has to wear in together. The rings have to scrape up and down on the cylinder walls and seat themselves, and in doing that, they're going to grind off a little bit of material, both from the ring and from the cylinder wall. And that metal's going to end up in the oil. So it's normal to see that. If you drain the oil after a break-in run and it looks like a beautiful brown pearlescent paint job, that's a problem. But if you drain the oil and right when you pull the plug out you see a little spurt of some metal in the oil, and then it clears up after that and maybe see a little bit at the end as it's trickling out, that's totally normal. And when you go through the paper element, you should see small particles here and there. If the entire thing is completely encrusted with metal, that's a big problem. And if there are big pieces in there, that's also a problem. The filter's job is to catch that, so it's good that it would catch that stuff before it gets to the engine, but it's a problem that it's there at all. There shouldn't be any big pieces of metal. It should all be fine, powdery fragments, really small particles, which is why I'm going to use a magnifying glass. Hopefully I won't see anything that'll be too big. And so I'm going to do that off camera, and I'll come back and show you if there's anything important or unique that comes up. I'll make sure to put that on camera. So stand by. Okay, so I've finished inspecting the entire oil filter element, and in case you want an idea of how big it is, I'd say the entire thing is probably about 4 feet still creased like that. If you were to stretch it out completely flat, it's probably more like 5 feet. I didn't find anything at all alarming. I found exactly what I expected to see. But one thing I want to show you, and I'm not sure if it'll pick it up on camera, but with I've got an LED light on me to my right, and so it's really bright, and it reflects off of everything. And the filter element is still moist with oil, of course, and so it can be a little challenging. That's why I like to use a magnifying glass. With a magnifying glass, it makes it easy to see what is a piece of metal and what is just light reflecting off of liquid. One of the things you can do, and I did it on one of these pleats here, yeah, this one here, you may be able to tell that this one isn't as shiny. So I blotted it with a rag, and by doing that, that allowed me to see a little better. Now I've been looking at oil filters, cutting them open and looking at them for work for about 30 years now. So I'm pretty good at inspecting them and telling what's what. But if you haven't done it before and you're just curious, blotting it to get the oil out like this is a technique that can help a little bit. You just want to make sure that when you're doing that, you're not wiping, you're just blotting, and that can soak up a little bit of the oil. And I really don't know how it's going to come out on the camera, but I'm just going to point out there's a little metal flat fragment there. There's one here. There is another one right here in the center, in the V of the fold. There's another one right there. And so in this pleat, I've got maybe 4, 5, 6. There's one right there. I've got 6 little fragments. And that's about typical of what I'm seeing. This one's got probably 10 or 12. And so some of them have more than others. It just depends on how the oil flows through the filter. So it'll vary widely. And again, I wouldn't panic if one of these had a lot of flakes in it, as long as it's not encrusted to the point to where you're actually wiping away flakes of metal. Everything that's in here should be to the point, small enough to the point that the filter actually caught it, and that you can see it, and that it'll stay there if you try and wipe it out. And so I'm really happy with what I see here. I knew based on what the oil looked like, or had a good idea based on what the oil looked like when I drained it right after the break-in. Well, I did about I guess I did about an hour total running time on it. I did the initial break-in, 30 minutes, elevated RPM, and for steady for about 20 minutes, and then varied it. Really don't have to do it that way specifically because I'm running a roller cam, and most of the break-in procedures that you follow are really specific to breaking in a flat tappet cam. So roller cams don't really require the same type of break-in, but that technique is good overall for the whole engine. And so I just went with what's normal and what's comfortable to me. And so when I was done, I drained the oil and took a good look at it when I drained it. And what I often do when I drain it is I run it. I use a painter's filter, one of those cone-shaped filters. And when I drain the oil, I let it run through that filter on its way into the drain bucket. And then I inspect that filter the same way I just did this paper element. And I didn't see anything alarming there, so I was pretty confident I wasn't going to see anything in this filter, which is why I waited a while before I did it. So I hope you found that helpful in some way in showing you how to cut open and inspect the oil filter. It's hard to capture on camera exactly what that looks like. It looks very different in camera than it does in person. It's really shiny in person too, but it's easier with the naked eye to determine what's a piece of metal and what's just having light reflected off of it. Just a few thoughts on the oil system, and hope you learned something, and thank you very much for watching.